What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Thursday, September 3rd. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NBA playoffs. Let's take a look at this 2-game slate. So at the point guard position, I like Kyle Lowry from the Toronto Raptors playing the Boston Celtics, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing point guards. But Kyle Lowry has averaged 39.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 23% usage rate. He's projected at 36.6 fantasy points here tonight. He scored 46 fantasy points in 40 minutes last game, so you could probably bump that projection up just a little bit. So I think he gets you 5 times value here. He's $7,800 FanDuel salary and $300 less on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 215.5 points scored in this game, so I like Kyle Lowry here versus the Boston Celtics. Okay, here's a value play for you. I like Monte Morris from the Denver Nuggets playing the LA Clippers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they've been pretty good versus opposing point guards. And Monte Morris has averaged 18.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 22 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He scored 27 fantasy points in 24 minutes last game. He's projected at 20.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's $4,200 FanDuel salary and $100 less on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 223 points scored in this game, so I like Monte Morris here versus the LA Clippers. Okay, who do we have at the shooting guard position? I like Fred VanVleet from the Toronto Raptors playing the Boston Celtics, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing shooting guards, but Fred VanVleet has averaged 36.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He scored 39 fantasy points in 42 minutes, and he scored 45 fantasy points versus the Celtics the game before that. He's projected at 38.1 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's $7,700 FanDuel salary and the same price on DraftKings. So I like Fred VanVleet here versus the Boston Celtics. Now this is kind of a risky pick here. This guy really has not played well during the playoffs. We haven't seen the big upside that we know he's capable of, but I'm going to take a shot on him here tonight. You're going to get him at low ownership. I like Paul George from the LA Clippers playing the Denver Nuggets, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing shooting guards. Paul George has averaged 36.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 30% usage rate. He's projected at 33.3 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he scores 40 plus fantasy points here and gets you 5 times value. He's $7,700 FanDuel salary and $500 more on DraftKings. So I definitely prefer that FanDuel price, but I like Paul George here versus the Denver Nuggets. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I like Jalen Brown from the Boston Celtics playing the Toronto Raptors, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Jalen Brown has averaged 33.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He scored 40 fantasy points in 35 minutes last game. He's projected at 33.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's 6,800 FanDuel salary and 600 more on DraftKings. So I like Jalen Brown here versus the Toronto Raptors.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on.
Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, here's a value play for you. I like Jerami Grant from the Denver Nuggets playing the LA Clippers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing small forwards. Jerami Grant has averaged 21.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 27 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. Now, he only scored 9 fantasy points in 35 minutes last game, but he scored 22 and 23 fantasy points in the 2 games before that. He's been averaging right around that 22-25 fantasy point mark here in the playoffs. I think he returns to those numbers here tonight. He's projected at 23 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value. He's 4,800 FanDuel salary and 100 more on DraftKings. So I like Jerami Grant here versus the LA Clippers. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. This guy's just been killing it every night. I love the price point. I think he's going to get plenty of minutes. Even with Robert Williams getting a few extra minutes here, he still played 30 minutes last game and scored 29 fantasy points. I like Daniel Tice from the Boston Celtics playing the Toronto Raptors, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Daniel Tice has averaged 24.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 24 minutes per game with a 15% usage rate. He's projected at 27.3 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's 5,400 FanDuel salary and 100 less on DraftKings. So I like Daniel Tice here versus the Toronto Raptors. The other power forward that I like here is Monte Morris from the LA Clippers playing the Denver Nuggets, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing power forwards. Monte Morris has averaged 26.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He's projected at 23.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's 4,800 FanDuel salary and 600 more on DraftKings. So I like that FanDuel price. So I like Monte Morris here versus the Denver Nuggets. Okay, moving on to the center position. I like Nikola Jokic from the Denver Nuggets playing the LA Clippers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 13th most fantasy points to opposing centers. Nikola Jokic has averaged 44.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 27% usage rate. He's projected at 47.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value. He scored 51, 47, and 45 fantasy points in the last 3 games, so he's been consistently scoring between 45 and 50 plus fantasy points. He's 9,800 FanDuel salary and 300 less on DraftKings. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 223 points scored in this game, so I like Nikola Jokic here versus the LA Clippers. Okay, here's a value play for you here at the center position. I like Robert Williams from the Boston Celtics playing the Toronto Raptors, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing centers. Robert Williams has averaged 17 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 13 minutes per game with a 14% usage rate. But take a look at his last 2 games. He scored 18 and 27 fantasy points in 17 and 18 minutes. And he was in a little bit of early foul trouble last game. So I think he could get up to about 20 minutes. He's a point per minute monster. He can get you those rebounds, blocks, and he's been fantastic shooting from the field. He's projected at 16.6 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score you 20 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more. He's $3,800 FanDuel salary and $200 less on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 215.5 points scored in this game, so I like Robert Williams here versus the Toronto Raptors.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.